Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Environmental Coffee House. I'm thrilled to have Paul Beckwith back with us, and hopefully, you will all hurry and join, and we can start our discussion. Paul, there are some new people that are with our channel that follow us and may not be completely familiar with your work. So, what I would love you to do, Mr. Paul Beckwith, is to talk about who you are, how you started, how long you've been doing this, abrupt systems, climate systems, system scientists, all the things that you are. And then we're going to go on, and I've got some questions. And then we're going to do an interactive with the chat because I tell them to come with their questions, especially when they've got someone like you live. So, welcome everybody. Let me say really quickly hello to my moderators. Thank you, Kim, for moderating. And I don't know if what other moderators are here. Kim is here, but hey, thank you. So here we are. Take it away.
Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Beckwith, and Sandy has graciously invited me to come to her program to talk, to kind of let people know. Well, to have a chat. I think we're going to talk about climate change or something like that.
Yeah,
Is that
I
right?
think we might be talking a little
Cats and
bit
dogs
about
maybe as
climate.
well.
Yes, cats. I know I still have Buddy and I miss Shackleton. We had Shackleton and so in common. I loved
Yes.
Shackleton.
Yes, I haven't got a replacement for him yet, but
Mm.
I'm meeting opposition from other family members. I mean, Newton keeps us pretty busy.
Oh, he's beautiful.
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel. I posted many videos on there, probably several thousand by now. What I like to do is understand the new science. So I basically search and get new peer-reviewed papers on all aspects of climate change and try to read them and understand them myself. And part of the process of me actually understanding the video, the paper, the peer reviewed paper,
Mm-hmm.
is if I need to know it well enough to communicate it to other people in plain English, plain language. So that's what I do, climate educator for the most
Yep.
part. I also occasionally teach climatology, meteorology, oceanography, courses like that, physical geography. Most of my teaching's been at University of Ottawa. I've also taught at Carleton University. I'm Ottawa based.
That's right.
I
Elbows
also
up.
elbows up. Yes, I
Elbows
also
up.
do.
Yes.
I also do the odd contract, some contracts with some of the First Nations people, doing climate
Oh,
risk assessments, other, the
wow.
teaching contracts, because I usually teach as a part-time professor, which is on contract basis. And I go to the climate conferences. I've got my own video channel, Paul Beckwith. Just Google me on YouTube. And also, I work with other various groups of people, including the Healthy Planet Action Coalition,
Yeah.
a little bit. Mostly, we on a weekly basis with Climate Emergency Forum. We
Abs-
produce videos. We have different guests, and occasionally, maybe once a month, with a group called FacingFuture.tv. So make sure you check out those groups.
Good.
I try to put
Great.
out a video every couple days, and I go to the climate conferences and some technical conferences. Mostly I don't travel a lot. I mean, I try
Mm-hmm.
to minimize it, but I do think it's worth it for me to attend the COP, the Conference of Parties, the yearly climate change conference. So I was in Baku, Azerbaijan in
I
November.
know.
And then I didn't go to the previous one in Dubai, but I went to the one before that in Egypt, and then before that in Glasgow. And the first one I went to was in Lima, Peru in 2014. Stuart Scott
Yep.
invited me along
Never
and
forget that.
had me put on a polar bear suit in the very, very hot conditions in Peru at the time. And then Paris was a big one the year after the COP 21, I guess it was. So I try to communicate. I try to educate the public on climate. There's a lot of science involved. There's a lot of questions. As a result, there's a lot of denialism. So I try to
Yeah.
figure out what's going on myself and then communicate that information. And by doing that, by being so diverse, I look at the overall system. Many scientists are very focused and specialized on their particular niche, very narrow area, and they
Yeah.
don't see the big picture. So they miss a lot of things, a lot of connections between things. So,
Good
if
to
you've heard
hear
of the
that.
term, yeah, I try to look at it from a systems point of view. And if you hear the term, what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic, it's not like Las Vegas. That was the original term. I came up with that
I know
about
you
over a
did.
decade ago. Weather weirding, weather wilding, weather whiplashing, those sorts of
And
things.
we all use all of them.
Blue ocean event.
Uh,
Those terms are all mine. And at some point I have aspirations to write a book on my climate communication work.
oh, that would be very meaningful. It would really kind of go full circle, actually. Wonderful. Yes, I followed you for a long time, since probably 14 is when I discovered you. I'm pretty sure it was about 2014. And then the rest is
I thought you were
history.
gonna. I thought you when you were 14. I thought you
Oh,
were.
oh yeah, when I was 14. Okay, Paul. I'm
You
older than
discovered me when
you,
you were
Paul.
14,
I'm
right? So
older than you, Paul. I'm older than everyone. I have gone into the crone status. I'm the elder of the community.
the
So,
wise
well,
elder, right?
one of the
Yeah.
wise elders, and there's Carolyn Baker, of course, who is the actual
Mm.
wise elder of the community. But so, Paul,
Yeah.
in all of this work that you have done, I wonder if you want to, talk about a little bit about, well, it's abrupt climate change. We've been calling this for a long time, but a lot of times with collapse, people just don't see, it's like years and decades of like a gradual decline and making it difficult to recognize. But do you think humanity is having problems recognizing the moment?
I think I think the biggest problem is that people don't want to believe what's in front of their eyes for the most part. A lot of people have sort of a gut feeling that something's changed
Yeah.
in the climate system. They certainly have a feeling that things have changed in their wallets, their insurance rates. Try to insure a car, try to insure a house. Rates are going way up depending on where you live. And in some places, we know things are uninsurable in some places. Like if you live on if you have a place in Florida on the beach or something, you can't insure it, or your insurance rate. I have a lot of Canadians have made the pilgrimage to Florida in winters. Our winters are still pretty cold, even with climate change, and so they go and they live in Florida for the winter or for
Mm-hmm.
several months. And a friend of mine bought a place. He's been there like 15 years or something. So he bought a place, and his insurance on his place, small place near the beach, was 1,500 a year, and now it's 15,000 a year. And
15,000.
yeah,
15,000.
15,000. And he considers himself lucky because there's a lot of neighborhoods where you can't even get insurance at all. So when people can't insure their properties, the risk is, of course, much higher. We get insurance to lower risk. But it also means that if you sell your place, somebody has to buy it in cash because they can't take a mortgage out because it's not insurable,
Right. Wow.
right? Unless they
Yeah.
can find some insurance company to cover them. And if you look at vehicles, I mean, just look at these severe weather events that we're seeing are having more and more impact on infrastructure, on buildings and cars and roads, and that all costs money to repair. So it basically drives up inflation. So I don't think climate change is, if you think of inflation, people don't think of climate change for sure.
Oh,
They
no.
think of, if you're a MAGA, you think it's Biden's fault, right? And if you're if you're a Biden person, think, well, it's just, the cost of living has gone up, it's whatever reasons, but you don't generally attribute it to climate change. But I would argue that climate change is probably the biggest driver of many types of inflation now. Next time you get a field flooded out and you lose all the crops, well,
Right.
there's obviously not going to be as many to go around, and the price is going to go up, right? So this is, food inflation is huge. Inflation of general goods is huge. The tariffs are only going to add to that in the U.S. They're already doing that.
Oh,
Um, so,
absolutely.
all, so all of these things are kind of, adding up, and it's fortunately there's a lot of people around the world, a lot of scientists around the world that are looking at climate change and publishing papers in good journals and stuff. So the loss of the U.S. science, which looks like it's happening big
It
time,
hurts.
widespread, is hurting. I mean, the long term danger is if these people just up and leave the U.S. and go to research places around the world where they can do their climate research, because a lot of them will like it there and eventually probably just stay where they moved to. They won't necessarily go back, even if the government changes,
Right.
right? There's a loss of trust there. Some of the work that NOAA does is irreplaceable, really, I think. And so if the NOAA budgets are severely slashed as much as is threatened, we're going to lose things. Probably the best example of NOAA, well, of course, the obvious one is the weather forecast, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
not running their climate models,
Mm-hmm.
if the National Weather Service isn't getting the data that they need to make extreme weather forecasting, tornadoes, hurricanes, etc., their
Mm-hmm.
forecast will worsen and more people will be in harm's way when these storms come.
Right.
And if FEMA's not there to repair damages, and if states don't get federal money to cushion the blows, then the recoveries will be much much longer. And it's you don't have to believe in climate change, but climate change believes in
Believes in
you,
you. That.
right? And
Yep.
this is you can get a T-shirt. I should have been wearing one of my T-shirts with that exact saying. My son set up an online store to flog T-shirts and caps.
I
Just
saw
Google
that
Paul,
on your video.
and you can pick up some
you
like what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the
you
Arctic, and
capitalist, you.
the climate catastrophe and things like that.
It's okay. Hey,
Climate mayhem. All
if
hell
you
is
don't
breaking.
do it, everybody else is going to do it anyway. It's not like
Yes,
anything
exactly.
is stopping Paul. And we might as well be proud and wear the Arctic t-shirt that if what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. But
Well, it's all
yeah.
part of trying to get the message out. So, I'm quite active on social media. I just try most
Mhm.
different things. I know many people got rid of their Twitter accounts, but I need to keep mine. I post my videos on there.
Yeah, me too.
Get lots of denier comments. I use all the other ones. I think that
Oh,
Reddit is very good. Blue Sky is very good. There's lots of good ones. I should probably. I mean, things like there's one called what Mushroom or something, or in Threads and these sort of things. Like I need
I
to. I
don't
know
know
there's
all
a
of
huge
them.
proliferation of others, and I actually should make more of an effort to, when I do a video, post it everywhere.
It's a
And
lot of work. I know. I
yeah,
advertise too. I do it the same thing. Blue Sky, Facebook. This is multi-streaming, so it's live on Facebook also. But I don't keep up with Facebook that much. And then all of a sudden, I'll go back 2 weeks later and say, "Wow, 400 people watched it," and I didn't even put an ounce of effort into Facebook. So we
yeah,
stayed. We
yeah.
stayed there.
Although you have to be careful, Sandy. Did you hear? Do you know who
Yes,
Meta
yes,
Spencer
yes,
is?
yes. I love Meta. She's
Okay,
wonderful.
so she's an
I
emeritus professor from
I know what
University of
happened.
Toronto, and she's 94,
Yep. Jeez.
and she used to do all of this youth stuff live on Facebook, and then some sort of kids got hold of
Yeah, she got
her
hacked.
link, and she got hacked, and
I know. I
there
couldn't
was
believe it.
nudity shown on her Facebook Live, so they immediately shut her down,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't.
Poor
She couldn't
Meta.
contact anybody. Like there was nobody. She tried to restore her channel and couldn't get a touch. So what she did after a month or two, she went to the CBC. She had a contact with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is Canada's national broadcaster.
Yeah,
Um,
she was talking about
and
it.
they did a program on her, and then lo and behold, Facebook restored her stuff.
It's
But now
wonderful.
she has a delay. She does her taping and then posts it there
Oh,
afterwards as
okay.
a result.
Well, I like to do my live shows, but I did know about Meta. I wrote to her. She wrote to me. I would love to have a discussion with her. I think she's just a phenomenal human being.
Have you not been on her show?
Not yet. She's asked me, but I have. I'm the worst
Yeah,
procrastinator in
yeah.
everything. It is.
Yeah, well,
It's
she's great. I mean, the other thing is, why don't I'll talk to her and
okay.
she can come on your show. That's the way
Yes.
to do it, right?
Oh my God, my mother would love it too. I've sent my
Yeah,
mother
yeah.
the links.
We'll get
Well,
her.
my mom's 91. So when she got the link for Meta and I showed her what Meta's doing, my mom felt much better about life in general, even though it's,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
they even named a whole company after her, right? I mean,
Spence and Meta.
we had
It could be
the
two, Spencer's Gift or Meta. Meta.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
my mother's name happens to be Netta as opposed
Oh,
to
that's
Meta.
nice.
So
Well, guys, I'll put a link in for you to Meta's channel so that it is in the show notes. Paul's information is in the show notes, but well, we're going to move on to a little bit of some seriousness, Paul. I want to ask you, what is your specific hierarchy in the collapsing tipping points? One, two, three. Let's hear it.
okay, so it's a tough question because there's not equal consequences from all of the tipping points,
All
right? So
right.
I mean, so one obvious one is the Arctic just getting so warm, right? That we
Mm-hmm.
lose we have huge calving from say Greenland, and
Yes.
we have huge loss of like sea ice disappears. We have the blue ocean event. The Arctic warms like crazy, and there's all kinds of further disruptions around the planet in terms of because of the jet streams just going completely haywire. So that was, but it's interesting because that's one major tipping point, if you like, in the climate system.
It is.
But could be completely counteracted by the ocean current shutdown. So the AMOC, the
Mm-hmm.
Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, shutting down, and there's good evidence showing that it's greatly slowed. There's
Yeah.
certain cold spots in the North Atlantic. The warming water is becoming less. It's lighter. There's more stratification of the ocean, so there's
Yep.
less vertical mixing, so there's less water going to recharge the whole circulation system. And if the AMOC fails, we know that the Arctic will get very, very cold,
Mm.
and it will stay cold for that could be several hundred years even.
Mm-hmm.
And if it gets, how cold would it be? Well, the temperatures in Eastern Canada would probably, coastal regions of Eastern Canada, Newfoundland, the Maritimes, would probably drop about 3 degrees Celsius mean
Oof.
annual temperature.
Oof.
Parts of Europe, like Britain, would get super cold, but the Baltic states and like Norway would be hammered. Mean annual temperatures in Norway could drop like 10 degrees Celsius. We're
But
talking
it's
Celsius.
not a day after tomorrow scenario like it's going to happen.
No,
I mean, I've talked about this. Jim and I have done many shows, Science Talk with Jim Massa. We've done many shows on AMOC. So it's not like it's,
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah. It's
movies.
not.
It's
It's
not the
gonna. It's going.
movies.
No, no, it's not going to happen instantly. But see, this is a good point. It's not the movies. So what we need is, we need the movies to have some accurate disasters, right?
Yeah.
We need
Accurate
like
disasters.
not like the day after tomorrow. We need the movies to have great science, all of the best science, and then make a movie out of it, right? And that's another way to communicate. And but and it's so that's two tipping points. I mean, the jet stream waving it like there's also strange things happening in the stratosphere. So climate change is a warming of the surface of the Earth. It's a
Mm-hmm.
warming of the lower atmosphere, the troposphere. It means
Mm-hmm.
there's more water vapor. More water vapor, when it condenses into droplets, there's more energy in the atmosphere, more powerful storms. The jet streams guide them because they're wavy. You get storms stuck in place and the whole bit. You get an increase in frequency, severity, and duration of extreme weather events, and then they're also happening in places they didn't happen before. So and
Perfect.
like we can think springs here, and then suddenly we can get several feet of snow deep in the south in Texas, for example. Jet stream coming
Mm-hmm.
down, Arctic air spilling down, and a lot of this is related to the when we talk about the jet streams, we're really talking about the tropospheric polar vortex. That's another name
Mm-hmm.
for the jet stream, the tropospheric polar vortex. Well, there is a stratospheric polar vortex,
Right.
which the media has just coined the polar vortex. So when you hear polar vortex, they're
It's
talking about by
yeah.
default the stratospheric one, and that just basically broke down about a month and a half ago. It
Mm-hmm.
just collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
What can happen is when it's very cold in the stratosphere and low pressure, you get a nice circular movement of air around it. It's centered at the North Pole, the northern hemisphere one. And what can happen is you can get a sudden stratospheric warming where suddenly get high pressure, very warm air shooting right up into the stratosphere, and that can totally disrupt the polar vortex up in the
Ay,
stratosphere.
yes.
And then that can carry down to the lower atmosphere and cause more extreme waviness of the jet stream, for example,
Mm-hmm.
an extreme weather event. So and what happens when you get this polar vortex, nice sort of ordered, very strong winds circling the North Pole? Well, it can actually be disrupted by shifting off of the pole, is one thing, and still being very strong, or you get this sudden stratospheric warming and it can split into two. So you have two vortices that are counter rotating up there, both of them weaker than the original, or the whole thing can just kind of fracture and break up, and
Oh
you
boy.
know, and all of these things we're expecting to see more of these things happen
Mm-hmm.
as climate change continues. I mentioned the warming is in the lower atmosphere, right? That's the warming. That's global warming. It's lower, but that means that there's less radiation, infrared, long wavelength radiation coming up from the warm Earth. Is being trapped in the lower atmosphere, so less is reaching the upper atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So the upper atmosphere is cooling, actually. So climate change is warming, of course, the troposphere where we live, where
Us.
all the weather happened, but the
Trans.
stratosphere is cooling. So
It's
because it's
wild.
cooling, then theoretically the polar vortex should actually get stronger and stronger, but it's being disrupted. That's not Sometimes it's very strong, much stronger than it would normally be, but it's being also disrupted much more with much more higher frequencies because of climate change. So this is another big sort of factor. Of course, we should talk about we have to talk about Antarctica. I mean,
Absolutely.
we when we talk about jet streams, and we're almost exclusively, most of us live in the northern hemisphere, right? When we talk about jet streams, we're assuming it's the jet stream circling the Arctic, and the polar
Mm-hmm.
vortex circling the North Pole. But those things exist in the southern hemisphere as well,
Mm-hmm.
and similar things are happening down there. Now, the southern hemisphere is Antarctic's been pretty isolated continent. Very
Yes.
strong winds circling it. There's a pathway for water to circulate completely around Antarctica, so you can get very strong ocean currents, very strong effects, and it's been doing its thing fine up until about 2015, and then bang, we broke the Antarctica
We broke it.
about 15.
Boom.
Yeah, we just
I
so
just
so
broke it.
so sea ice, instead of sea ice increasing 1.5% per decade from 1970 to 2010, 2050, it started reversing, and we had record lows. We've had a whole bunch of record low sea ice levels around Antarctica since 2015, We've had a huge decline in sea ice. We're getting warm water intruding underneath the ice shelves.
Mm.
Most of the ice shelves are sitting on top of bedrock, well below sea level, so the warm water is intruding in. The air temperatures above Antarctica are warming, but if you go from minus 40 Fahrenheit, which is minus 40 Celsius, if you go from that temperature to minus 35 Celsius, it's still frozen. It's still ice. It's still snow, right? But it's the water underneath that's warming and melting and
Uh-huh.
cutting away from underneath that's doing the most
Yeah.
damage to that ice
Mm-hmm.
log. So the calving of ice shelves is getting greater, in both Greenland and Antarctica. But again, the whole system, nobody knows for sure. Like the blue ocean event could happen first in Antarctica, right? Less than 1 million square
Which
kilometers of
is
water,
something not
right?
many of us have ever talked about. You talk about it, but
Right.
not a lot of us have talked about a blue ocean event happening in Antarctica.
I mean, that would have been
Wild.
unfathomable to think of but after 2015, all bets are off, right? We've had some levels of sea ice extremely low there, and the
Yeah.
variation is larger there as well. So anyway, so you can't really just look at one part of the planet, which is what a specialized scientist does. They'll look at one part of the planet, maybe one thing. You're an atmospheric physicist, or you're a glacier person or sea ice person,
Right.
and that's your thing. And it used to be that you could ask these people. I used to do this all the time as a joke. I'd talk to a sea ice expert and I said, well, what do you think about the glaciers on land? Oh, I don't study that. I
Oh,
can't
jeez.
comment on
Right.
that. Well, are they going to melt a lot faster? Well, you have to ask the glacier expert, right? So scientists became paranoid about stepping out of their area of expertise. So I said, well, somebody's got to look at the whole system. It's more important to look at the whole system. So
Absolutely.
I think more people are starting to sort of look and think that way. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's a couple different tipping points. There's also, I have to mention the carbon that's stuck in the permafrost, because that's a big concern, right? A huge
Mm-hmm.
release. I mean, Timothy Lenton he wrote some great papers in like 2012, tipping points in the climate system, global tipping points in the climate system or something, 2008, 2012. He was one of the leaders on tipping points. He's now
Yeah.
at Exeter, and he's involved I just did a video last
Timothy
week
Linton. Yeah.
about the latest on tipping points. And what they did is they tried to look at all of the different 15 main tipping points, and they tried to relate them all to the carbon feedback tipping points, namely
Mm.
the permafrost and the Amazon rainforest. Because for the last number of years, the Amazon
Significant.
rainforest has gone from a carbon sink to a
Yep.
carbon source,
Yep.
actually. And the
Oh,
permafrost, as we get more and more thaw, there's a lot more slumps. We have these big, big, almost like big, huge, circular, almost like crater-like slumps in the Adoma, parts of Siberia, and people are recording really high methane levels in those. Ground's basically thawing and just collapsing and slumping. So there's huge amounts of carbon tied up in the frozen organic matter just in the first few meters closest to the surface in vast parts of the Arctic, and also the undersea permafrost underneath the shallow seas like the eastern Siberian Arctic shelf. And we've had Russian scientists, Shakova, and others that have been studying this for years. Peter Wadhams is a good guy to follow
love
on
him.
what.
We had him. Jennifer and I interviewed him years
Yeah,
ago, and every what you're talking about. It's exciting to me because it's just shades of a lot of the things that we have done. But it's so great to hear it from you again, live with us. That's all. And everybody seems to be excited in the chat. Thank you.
and people do see their own regions, the weather shifting. So if you want to go to a warmer climate, you don't really have to move. You can just stay where you are.
Yeah,
Like the warmth is coming to you, right?
it's coming. Yeah,
So,
it's coming. It was 82
maybe,
Fahrenheit here the other day, and then it went down by 40 degrees. More
yeah.
than that.
I mean, it's the I just did a video on some of the. It's interesting because there was a paper with a massive number of authors from various institutes in China. There was somebody pointed out that reference number 8 was a U of T person, which I didn't notice.
Oh,
There's a couple Americans on the paper, but it's a huge international collaboration, which is very important, to have these collaborations, and it's all on extreme weather events. It looks at the globe. It looks at how extreme weather events are taking off, and
mm.
what they talk about is flips. So flips from it gets very warm, much
Ah,
warmer than normal. It might stay there for a period of time, and then it drops down and gets much colder than normal. So they talk about it in terms of standard deviations. Like if it goes from one standard deviation above normal to one below, then it's classified as a flip. And they counted the number of flips across the world in different locations to see where how much it's increasing and where it's increasing the most. And they found out a couple things. I did a video on the details of this. You have to read the paper. It's a really good
good,
paper.
good one.
And but watch my video if you don't understand when you're reading the
That's
paper,
right,
because
guys.
hopefully I'm not confusing you more. I'm
No,
explaining how what the paper is saying, and like I look at Ottawa, where I live, as an example. So this last winter, for example, we used to have, it would get cold, we'd have winter. We
yeah,
might have a thaw, after a few months, brief thaw above zero, and then but it would basically stay below zero for most of the winter, with a few
hmm,
exceptions. But now if you just count the number of times you go from below zero to above zero, back to below zero.
weather whiplash.
Yeah, weather
That's what
whiplashing,
they
which was
called
the
it.
phrase I came up with, and that's exactly what's happening. But it's not just; it can happen on within a season, like winter in Ottawa. 37 times it crossed the 0 point.
37 times.
37 back and forth,
Oh,
back and forth. And sometimes it's not just one standard deviation above. It might be three or four standard deviations warmer than normal, and then drop down. So just a couple days ago, we hit 25 Celsius, which is 77 Fahrenheit,
yeah.
by late afternoon. And by the dawn the next morning, it was pushing just below zero.
Yeah, that's what happened here. It's
Celsius, which
craziness.
was 32 Fahrenheit, just
Mm-hmm.
hovering about zero, and then it went up to about 10 or 12 in the day, and then went back down to zero, and then within a few days is back up to 24. See, the problem is, I mean, the buds come out, everything thinks it's spring, and
Yeah,
then
I know.
if you go get a killing frost, go well below zero, it kills all the buds, and everything has to start over. So a couple of years ago, there was about $100 million of damages to the apple crops, for example,
Yeah,
because
remember
just
that.
in one province. I think it was in. I think it was also. I think it was in Ontario's apple crops,
Yeah.
and BC seen similar
Was
things.
it more
So
Western Ontario, I thought? Yeah.
yeah, British Columbia. I think it happened
Well,
there.
that's,
Maybe that's what.
yeah.
But anyway, you get these wild swings of temperature, and it's very difficult. It's called the phenology of how the ecosystem, the timing
Mm-hmm.
works. Like the buds come out, the insects start coming out and feeding on them. Birds come back and start feeding on like it's a whole ecosystem chain. And then as soon as you start killing certain parts of the ecosystem, the timing's all off. The birds come, there's nothing to eat, for
Yeah.
example, right? So,
I
so the whole
watch
eco,
it. I watch it right where I live in my on my
yeah,
little homestead here.
yeah. I mean, if you know any birders, ask them how the
Tell
birding's
him.
going,
All right, I'll
right? They
ask
have
him
apps
if
on
he's
their
here.
phone. They have an
Mm,
app on their phone where they
mm-hmm.
can simulate a bird call, and then the bird will actually come, and then they can take a picture. I think that's kind of cheating. You might as well just like
I
download a
don't know
picture of
about
the
that.
bird from the web. But anyway, the if you talk to birders, they're seeing bizarre things. They're seeing some birds that they've never seen before, and they look them up, and they're like from
They're like,
halfway across the
right.
world. They're in the wrong neighborhood. For some reason they've
Everybody's
migrated there.
confused.
And numbers of birds, the total number counts of the species and number of different species has dropped way off in the U.S. There's a paper. I'll probably do a video on it in a few
Good.
days. I can't. I can't cover everything. I think I need to
You
do one of my.
try. You do a
Well,
pretty goddamn good job of it, Paul.
I need to. I'm gonna do. I feel this rant video coming on where I have like. I can
Oh
tell. I
yeah.
judge. I judge the. If you can look when you watch one of my videos, look at the number of tabs across the top, because that's a good indication of like I'm just getting way behind, and I had time to do a rant video and spend a few, say, 30 seconds on each tab,
Oh boy.
which is related to some new scientific paper, new
Hmm.
finding. And just go through and have a totally random sort of cover smorgasbord of what's going on in the climate system. I do that every so often. So,
I like
and
that.
I justify it by, well, my computer is going to kick the bucket if I just have too many tabs open on it. So it's
Yeah,
slowing down.
it is an easy way to mess things up. Yeah, I've had that happen, but
Yes.
this is it's an interesting conversation because I think what happens up in Ottawa actually then kind of comes on down to here in the southern tier of Western New York. Eventually, I watch Canada and I'm like, okay, are we going to get it from the northeast of Canada, or are we going to get it from central Canada? Or we're going to get it eventually. We do. And sometimes it breaks up. I'm a weather nerd. I have 3 different weather apps on the phone and I watch everything. But I'm also a little paranoid because now where I live is now starting to be tornado alley, and it wasn't, and it's scary
Yeah.
because do you remember when the tornado hit my place in 2017? Well,
Yeah, I do.
right, and I have post traumatic. I have a whole spot now, whole safe room and helmet and rain gear, boots, and all that stuff downstairs in the safest part of my basement because we get tornado warnings, and anytime it's
Yeah.
going to be windy, it's frightening. Do you have any kind of understanding of that change in the atmosphere with tornado alley and things like that changing here and in Canada?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the first thing is, I'd love to see you wearing all your gear on one of your programs.
Okay. I'll have to
Okay,
do
so
it.
you got to put the hat, everything on.
All right.
I'm all ready because there might be a tornado warning or
Yeah.
something. It'll add to the sort of, yeah.
I
And,
did do a short. I showed everybody my area. I did do a short on that, but
yeah.
I didn't
I
put
mean, what
on
do
a
you do with
helmet.
all your cats? Do you
I
just leave them?
I
You
no, I
gather
got
them
a
all?
no. I have a cat door and I have all cat
Because,
carriers for them. I got to just shag them downstairs.
yeah, I mean, if the power goes off and there's no stores aren't open, and you need food, right? You got to have
Paul,
all those cats
I have
down.
enough. Somebody asked me on my last show, which was called Liberal Prepper or the Lefty Prepper, and someone
Yeah,
tried to get me on a gotcha, and they go, well, Sandy, what is it that you prep with, or what do you save or buy or whatever? I'm like, cat
cat
food and
food.
cat litter, and I have enough for a year. I have enough of that,
Yeah,
and I'm like, okay, so if anybody wants to come and rob me for cat litter and cat
cat
food,
litter.
any of
Like,
the more, do you think the zombies are gonna want my
yeah,
organic cat litter that's compostable in the backyard? But seriously, I think of them. I think of these things. But I am not a wild prepper, weirdo prepper. I'm a
yeah.
thinker, but I also don't like to leave my place. So I like to have the things I need to have. I have lots of rice, lots of beans, lots of, good things, but
Yeah, yeah. So the tornadoes, yeah. I first of all, I've been crazy enough to go with the meteorologist friend, tornado chasing in the
okay.
U.S. Multiple years. So I've done
Cool.
it about 4 or 5 years. And one year we got nailed by bad hail, which I had to
Ooh.
I had to take down all my videos and comments on social media about storm chasing in case my insurance company, saw all this and then annulled my didn't pay off on the claim for the hail damage to the car, cracked windshield, etc. But anyway, so we used to go, of course, to the deep south. Now, I should say, 3 years ago, a couple tornadoes visited us in
Mm-hmm.
Ottawa.
Mm-hmm.
We had one
How about
come
that?
across. It jumped the river and it went just north of sort of the main Parliament building streets in
Phew.
downtown Ottawa and caused
Terrifying.
damage and cut a swath up into Gatineau. The Ottawa River divides Ontario and Quebec. and we
Mm.
had a couple others, in the region as well. And then just that it was maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and then 3 years ago we had this strong derecho come through, and it caused tremendous damage. It brought down huge numbers of trees. These are more straight line winds from a
Right.
massive cold front coming through very quickly, pushing warm air up and the convective uplift and lots of energy in the air. And these derechos can reach tornado
Mm-hmm.
force winds, and tornadoes can spin off. So we've had that, although most of we do get tornadoes in Ontario and many other provinces. Mostly it's, people think of it as being out west in the plains.
Right.
They've had some of the record sized tornadoes for Canada. Edmonton, I've been to some of those sites on one of my trips across Canada. I stopped at the sites of where some of the biggest tornadoes were in Canadian
Whoa.
history. Not much to see, but just a plaque or something saying this was a big
Yeah.
event
Yeah. A
two
big event.
decades. But and I have done some studies. I've done some risk analysis for various groups on tornado risk. And there's actually a severe weather group at the University of Waterloo, I believe, that they go out whenever there's a tornado and they try to assess and rate how big the tornado was, et cetera, because they're definitely on the rise in Canada.
Mm.
And yes, so Tornado Alley clearly is shifting from the
Scary.
traditional deep south, central U.S., to western U.S. It's shifted east. It hasn't moved much
It
north.
is.
It has moved a bit north, but it's sort of like an oval, an elongated oval in the north south direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that whole oval has shifted definitely mostly east, but also a little bit north,
Yeah, I
and it's
think
actually.
I'm part of that little bit
Yes, yes.
northeast.
So this is what we, and I mean, if you look at there's a lot of factors that cause that, but also it has to do a lot with the jet stream locations, getting with the polar vortex, the stratospheric polar vortex, with the preconditioning of the land is very important. So if you have tremendous drought, heat and drought, and then you get torrential rains, which there's not enough time for the water to be absorbed and infiltrated into the ground. So it's
Mm.
mostly surface water. And then you can get very high evaporation. And from that very high evaporation, that can fuel more storms. And if the jet stream configuration is set up in this sort
Mm.
of mode, then the tornadoes are occurring in different places depending on all these factors. And so it is predictable that it's moving, and it's been doing that. Of course, it's doing it faster than expected.
Faster than
Right? You
previously
may have heard
expected.
of that
Isn't
term
that
before.
another? Yeah, isn't that another term? Yeah,
Yeah,
another,
it's kind of
another.
a silly term because surely we can change our expectations. So
Mm.
it's happening to me. It's slower than expected, I guess,
So,
because my expectations are much faster than mainstream
oh,
expectations.
well, yeah, like the mainstream scientists that are
Yeah.
that don't want to come out of their little niche or are afraid to say exactly what's where we are because it's not well nobody's going to go shopping if they know that we're
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
screwed up.
it's. I
Yeah.
mean, don't miss anything that James Hansen posts. He's at Columbia
Mm-hmm.
University. Google James Hansen, Columbia. Look at his website. Very rudimentary and basic. There's links to his articles. He puts out articles quite a bit,
Yeah, he's amazing.
which hopefully slows down and finishes his book because he's been working on this book. His great book Storms of Our Grandchildren was published over a decade ago. He's been working on a new book called Sophie's Planet. Sophie is
Oh,
one of his grandkids,
Grinch, yeah.
and I heard in the grapevine that that book is probably going to be ready around the fall, September.
Okay.
But the date has been pushed back. I should also caution that the publication date, keeps getting pushed back. It's been pushed back multiple times. It was supposed to be out a few years ago, but
He's
he's a busy
busy.
guy,
He's
and
busy.
but I think his publisher is applying the thumb screws on it.
A little
You know,
pressure. Well, he's a
yeah,
busy guy and
so
he's premier. I mean, he's very
yeah,
People want
Yeah.
to.
Anyway, his like he's explained in great detail why we've had this huge warming jump around the planet in the last couple of years. Like in 2023, 2024, breaking records left, right, and center.
Hmm.
Mean annual temperatures going well above 1.5 Celsius.
Right.
Record levels of greenhouse gases being emitted. CO2 particularly had a huge jump when the numbers just came out recently. So 2024 was way, way higher than 2023, and methane is on a tear upwards. And we're heading in the wrong direction
Oh,
for
yes.
multiple reasons. But some of the biggest reasons are that yes, of course, human anthropogenic emissions are still rising at record high rates, but the Earth capacity to absorb the
Hmm.
carbon to be a sink is reducing
Yes,
significantly. I
it
mentioned
is.
the oceans getting stratified and warmer. Well, warm water, some of the basic physics of things that dissolve in water. Warmer water can dissolve more solids, things like salt and
Hmm.
stuff, but less gases. Okay, so gases, colder water absorbs lots of gases like CO2 and other
Hmm.
things. But warmer water,
It
it
doesn't.
can't hold as much. Just think of, when you open a pop can, you get the fizzing, the gases coming out. That's a reduction. That's a change of the pressure, for the most part,
Hmm.
but it's also a cooling effect. So, it's basic. So anyway, the oceans are not absorbing as much of the carbon
No.
of the CO2
Oh,
and
and they're
methane.
getting, and they and oceans really are the barometer. I mean, they are the
Yeah,
thing that's happening. They're the, and
yeah.
people just don't see it. They don't
I
understand it.
know. I mean, the AMOC, when the water descends from the surface down to the ocean floor, it brings lots of gases and so on, right?
Yeah.
It sequesters a lot of carbon. The fact that it's doing that, that carbon goes down to the deep ocean floor. It settles out onto the ocean floor. With if we mess up that vertical mixing, we not only do
Yeah.
we not get the oxygen down below and the sequestration of the carbon, but we don't get the nutrients coming up from below, so we don't have the proliferations of phytoplankton and
Right.
ocean life. The base of the food chain suffers, and I haven't even mentioned ocean acidification, right? So there's all of these factors.
Ding,
I want
another one.
to. So we need to step back a bit with all of these things happening, and I'll do a video very soon on the 260-page happiness report 2025.
Happiness report. Oh boy.
Okay, there's a report. Just Google it.
Uh,
2025
the
happiness
happiness
report.
report.
This is your homework. You can read
Uh,
it, and then when you watch my
okay.
video, you'll be able to say, "Hey, you did this wrong," or "That's not what the report says," or because
I'm sure we'll be fine.
I'll skim it, and or if you read the report, you don't need to watch my video coming out soon because you'll be able to do your own video
No,
on it.
we watch you and then read the report, like I
Well,
did with.
yeah.
I'll tell you my favorite report. Well, was lately was how could we survive in a post-collapse world that you did your what by Stephanie Ross that you did the video about a month ago.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
I really like that because that's really what I'm exploring is that kind of situation, post collapse or how to acclimate post doom, Michael Dowd's the thing. But really,
yeah,
that
right.
was I really enjoyed your video on that and the history of civilizations that collapse, but don't have the extra added, you know, heating and CO2 and
Yeah,
what we've
I
done
mean,
through industrial
yeah, when
civilization.
civilizations collapsed in the past, it was usually some sort of regional thing or some war or strife or political collapse, lack of food, poor
Hmm.
planning, and they could just move somewhere else, right?
Right.
They could all get up and leave and migrate somewhere else and start
Which
over
happened.
again. But
Uh-huh.
this becomes more difficult, right?
That
So,
is what we
but
are
anyway,
seeing.
there's self-correcting factors like
All
global
right.
fertility rates are dropping significantly for many reasons. One of them is the heat,
Uh,
right? You know,
Yeah.
if you get too much heat, those little things that swim around from guys, they don't
Hmm.
swim as fast, and they don't. They're not as mobile and motile, and so it's gonna. We do have some self-correcting sort of factors
Yeah, but
here.
don't forget, Elon Musk will figure a way to make sure those little things artificially will swim around in as many people as possible. Can you believe that the push here in the United States is to just keep populating and having children and babies, yet cutting off, on the other hand, any services or health care for them? It's insane. Wacko.
Yeah,
Opposite
there's a
world.
lot of inconsistencies, shall we say,
Uh
in
huh.
different things that are being done. Yes.
Yeah, inconsistencies. Well, so if I get back a little bit to James, no, just to go backwards a little
Yes.
bit, because I know that there's that ongoing tug of war with the IPCC almost for him, and
Yes, there is.
he
Yes, absolutely.
says that they're conservative, and he thinks that they don't warn, I guess, adequately enough about 2C
Yeah,
that it's
well,
going to
he
happen. What do you,
basically,
what?
yeah, I mean, basically, he's arguing that they've made a couple serious mistakes in
Okay.
their understanding of the climate system and how
Let's
things
hear
work,
it.
and they've completely underestimated the equilibrium climate sensitivity, which is all else being equal. How much does the planet warm if you double the effective greenhouse gases, so CO2 equivalent? So it's not just CO2; it's methane, nitrous
Hmm.
oxide.
All of
You
them.
take the global warming potential and get some one number, CO2 equivalent. And, when you double that, what's the planetary temperature? They say 3 degrees Celsius. James and others are starting to argue well, James has always argued it's 4.5, at least 4.5. So they're off a little bit by like at least, 50% off. It's 50% higher
50%
than
off.
they say.
Yeah.
50% of 3 is 1.5, so it's
Hmm.
4.5. That's the first factor. But the reason why they're so far off is because they've completely misunderestimated the effect of aerosols in the atmosphere to cause
Right.
cooling, right? So they have a much lower climate sensitivity and a much lower aerosol effect. And the aerosol effect is huge. It's like rocket fuel to the climate system. So when the International Maritime Organization reduced sulfur in commercial shipping fuels, they mandated it from 3.5% sulfur content down to 0.5%, a 7 times drop in
Yep.
2020. The ships, there was a lot less sulfur going into the pristine ocean air,
Yeah.
and we had a result of as a result, there were far fewer clouds, far less solar radiation being reflected, so much
Hmm.
greater heating of the oceans,
They
and
got hotter.
much greater temperatures that translated into much warmer atmospheric temperatures and so on. So we've set all kinds of records in the last couple of years. So that's the main sort of premise that he's been arguing, and he's been arguing this for many years. And there's a lot of papers coming out now that are actually confirming this. And he also talks about China, because before 2020, the industrial pollution in China was horrendous. The small particles, the aerosols, the sulfurs, all kinds of other stuff, and they really cleaned up their industry. They had the communist system. They just told companies, "You're not going to do this anymore." So the emissions went way, way down of aerosols, and that caused far fewer clouds over China and much greater warming. And those clouds, of course, travel; they don't just stay over China,
Right.
right?
Right.
So much greater warming now. So let me ask you, what's going to happen? Maybe people can think now. Well, what's happening right now? We think of tariffs. All we worry about is prices. What about
The
the
shipping
shipping traffic from
and
China?
yep.
If that plummets off of the cliff, these ships aren't plying their routes. The air is going to get a lot
Yeah.
cleaner. There'll be a lot fewer clouds. This is going to cause another spike in warming,
Yeah,
is
and
it
you're
not?
never going to hear that on the media, on the
Exactly.
nope, you're not going to hear that. We
But
may talk about it, but you're never going to hear about it unless
right. So
James Hansen can snag a spot, or you
yeah,
can
I'm,
snag
I'm
a
sure.
spot.
I'm sure James will have an article, in a few weeks or a month, about this very thing. He'll talk about the reduction of shipping traffic and how the warming we can
Yeah,
expect,
you can
the
see
the
that's going to
the,
happen.
the warming
How
spike.
significant do you think that spike could be? Yeah.
Well, it's we have to look like the international maritime. The International Maritime Organization is a UN body. They have a website. You can look at sort of the history of sulfur in shipping fuels and
Okay.
how they've reduced it. So it was 3.5% in 2020, cut to 0.5%. But before that, it was as high as 7, 8, 9%, and then they mandated it to be cut back and cut back. So it's been, they cut it back, wait a couple of years, cut it back more. So
Mm-hmm.
they brought it down to 3.5. That was significantly lower than, say, a decade earlier. So you can look at the sensitivity of the warming
Mm-hmm.
relative to that. And now, basically, with the number of ships being greatly reduced, if shipping traffic is down another 50%, or and with such low sulfur in the fuels, I mean, we can get, I could see the temperature jumping zero point 0.3 degrees, half a degree Celsius, global average temperature spiking up enormously. But then the problem is the feedbacks from that, because then
Mm-hmm.
that reduces the ocean sinks again, and but it will certainly cause wreak havoc on our
We're in
weather pattern
trouble. Yep, we're
and
in
weather
trouble.
world. So
So up there, I guess I'm gonna segue a little bit because I have this hope for Canada. And I can see Canada becoming, because the United States is throwing away everything good, I can see Canada potentially becoming the climate and meteorological and research hub of the world if they so choose, and really take the United States place and probably have an NOAA depending on what's going to happen. Do you see any of that potential? Because I am saying it, I'm hoping it, I'm saying it.
well, I think the first, I mean, the population difference is huge. We're like we're always about 10% of your size. Our economy is 10% the size. We pull above our weight in a lot of different areas, but there's certainly are we're very similar to the U.S. Like, there's almost like you could come and live here in Canada and you'd notice a few things, like why are people putting ketchup on fried? No, there's some things that we do
Okay.
which people, like in the US, they look at us and say, what? And I can't they can't, but I mean, we're mostly the same,
Hmm.
right? So if you're a scientist in the US at NOAA, and you suddenly NOAA doesn't exist anymore, and you can't do climate science, and you're young, you're flexible, then you can come to Canada and just fit right in. Like, start at a university, do your research. There's almost no culture shock,
So you
right? You
think
can
that's
watch
going to
all your
happen?
TV.
Yeah, right. You watch all
Well,
the TV
I
programs.
think there's a lot of inquiries to Canadian universities for
Yeah.
this very thing, and also there are a lot of scientists. A lot of people over the years have immigrated to the U.S. from other countries, from
Right.
European countries.
Right.
And if you're a climate scientist and you immigrate and your job disappears and the country doesn't appreciate the work that you do, your field, you can either switch fields, or you can go back to where we have strong roots to wherever we're from. So people will go back, and then over time, like, so how much, it depends on how long things last, I guess. Like,
I
if
don't think
the
we
if
have 3 more years of this at least. At
yeah,
least,
yeah.
but we have no knowledge of how far all of this nonsense is going to go. I mean, it's pretty sickening.
Well, there's a lot of things that can happen very quickly, right? Because the tariffs on China, nobody's feeling those yet in the U.S.
No,
really.
not yet.
But when those
Weeks.
ships, there's a huge lag. You got this ocean-going ship. It's loaded with stuff from China for the U.S. It takes 3 weeks to arrive. There's warehouses that have months,
Yeah, but they're
months
still
of
on the
work.
way.
But as these things start to deplete, and prices go up and shelves are empty,
Yeah.
the public might go and say, hey, we can't do this sort of
Well,
nonsense with
the public is
trade.
out there in the streets, but it is changing minds that are
Yeah.
diluted by misinformation, disinformation, and Fox News and Newsmax. And I mean, we have just the worst. It
Yeah.
is
Well, I
very
think that,
sad.
so I guess the thing is, I mean, AI is taking off, right? It really is taking off. Why can't we just? The danger is that fortunately, the vast majority of news is reasonable, but the fake
Local.
stuff tends to see a lot more eyes and be spread.
And
And if the
Sunday.
AIs that are scraping the web start picking up all of this fake stuff and start pumping out fake stuff, because
Yeah,
that's what they've learned, right? I mean, it depends on how smart they really are. Like, are they able to
we'll
check
see.
multiple sources, check peer reviewed research on stuff to get facts, or
Mm-hmm.
do they just go with the consensus? So I guess that, right, it could go either way, right? I mean, we could use AIs in, say, Facebook, and anything that anybody posts that's completely wacko, completely made up, like an AI generated video, that could just be flagged by an AI and it could not even appear on the site. Or it could, right now, what they're doing is they're tending to leave it on the site and flagging and saying this could be fake, right? Or whatever.
Yeah,
But it
but
depends on how we use these tools, right?
mm-hmm.
Because they can be very powerful tools. Like, I just bought a book on AI and some of the different applications that people are starting to use this for, scientists today, like to do do literature reviews on subjects, to generate ideas for new research topics. To They've even used AI to try to make some like in protein folding and new drugs and medication, you can use AI to go and do all the simulations and come out with a couple great candidate molecules at the end of it that could be, would be the best potential cures for a particular disease or something. So it's always a double-edged sword, right? These technologies.
Yeah.
Right, the danger is that they get into the wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They're used on the
Yep.
evil side,
Yep.
before we even recognize what's happening.
What is the evil side? Right.
Right. So
Exactly. Uh,
I'm doing some work with AI and climate change.
okay.
I'm way behind, but I promised
Hey,
some reports on
we
AI
trust
and climate change.
you. We trust you
So
to do this. We trust
so
you to do this.
I'm doing some stuff on that, and
Okay.
you know it's
Good.
it's and I've always told people, I said, when you have an AI that's as smart as, say, Forrest Gump, like, within about a year, the AI, you got like Newton and Einstein AI.
In a year.
Like it's such a curve upwards, right? So,
Right, right. So, Paul, do you think that the political climate in the US, do you think there's really going to be an effort to rein in any emissions, or you think that are we looking at a worst case scenario, at least emanating out
well,
of our country, which I'm ashamed and embarrassed about?
I mean, look at it this way. If the economy in the U.S. is basically set back significantly, just I don't want to use the word destroyed, but right, then
Hmm.
emissions will collapse
Yeah.
from the U.S.
And then we got to get warmer anyway.
Right, then Al Gore can be giving the UN prize to Trump for
Oh my
slashing
God.
emissions more than any other president has done. One of the prime ministers of Canada,
Uh,
liberal, very well known in Canada, Jean Chrétien from Quebec, he suggested, just he suggested, it's we had our election on Monday.
yes, I know.
Right?
Well, we're
And
watching
it seems
that.
like it was like a month ago, but it was just on Monday. And so, in a few days ago, Jean Chrétien, he suggested that that Canada award Trump the Order of Canada for uniting Canada
Absolutely.
and making Canada patriotic, making Canada stand up and say, why do we have internal trade barriers between our provinces? Like, why,
Mm-hmm.
if an alcohol is brewed in Alberta, why can't we sell it across Canada? Why can it only be sold in specialized liquor stores in Alberta?
Right.
Like internal trade barriers are probably damaging Canada more than what any tariffs can
Isn't
do
that
right now.
fascinating? It's
So
fascinating to learn about
so there's
Canada.
right. So there's now a huge push to just get rid of those trade barriers. And this would be a very positive thing. There's stuff that Canada's been stuck on for years, and like we wonder, like, why are we doing this still? Tradition or whatever, entrenched interests,
Right.
right? I mean, the Liberals are even talking about building an east-west pipeline so that we can just, so that we can produce our oil and sell it to other provinces. It doesn't. Most stuff goes north-south. If you look at the border and you
Mm-hmm.
look at power lines,
Mm-hmm.
electricity lines, if you look at pipelines, or if you look at major highways and transportation grids, just about everything, rail,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's all going north-south.
Sure, it is. And with a lot of it in the United States, we fought that Northern Access pipeline that was supposed to go from all through my community, through eminent domain, taking friends' farms to go under the Niagara River to Canada to be sold overseas. But we didn't get it. We fought it and we won against it. But it's not like pipelines are going away tomorrow, you know.
Yeah,
Hey, you know
yeah,
what I want to ask you actually? With Prime Minister Carney's win, can you talk a little bit about the carbon fee or credit or tax and getting rid of that or changing that, and what is the appreciable difference in that
yeah. Well,
policy?
about 4 months ago, the Conservatives were up. Liberals, they've been in power for nine years,
Huh?
almost a decade. Um, you know, Different governments, three, different leaders, but mostly Trudeau, running the show. People got this visceral hatred for Trudeau, right? Far beyond, anything he's done, but just some. So Trudeau. So the Conservatives were up, like, at one point 29% in the polling. Liberals weren't even going to have a viable opposition party at one point, get like a dozen seats or whatever. The biggest majority in Canadian history was going to go to the Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre,
Yep,
right?
PP.
But that was 4 months ago. That's all the polls were showing this. So what happened? Well, the first thing is that
The orange
um,
turd happened.
well, the first, yeah, okay. So Trump was elected, right? He started talking about Canada as the 51st state, and that just went on and got more and more serious. And then Trudeau, he tried to change the. He wanted to get Carney as the finance minister, so he told his finance minister that she was going to lose her job, but she had to give a throne speech the next day or something, so she just quit. Right? Said, I'm not
Uh,
giving this speech. What's the
God.
point? She left. Trudeau was in a crisis, and finally, there was enough people that convinced him, hey, you got to step down. You don't have a hope, right? And you're just going to bring the
Wow.
country down. And now we have the U.S. threat on Canada. So Trudeau was
Sickening.
finally convinced to step down, or maybe the Liberals would have got their act together and booted him. I think probably behind the scenes that they were getting their act together and were going to boot him, and he had no choice. So anyway, he stepped down on a Friday. On a Monday morning, first thing early, he did a selfie from a hardware store. He was buying like plumbing supplies and stuff, and he did this selfie, right? And that was it. Like, we haven't heard a thing from him since that. Why did he do that? Well, he was being kicked out of his house. He had to move. He had to get some supplies
Oh my
because he
God.
had the house of the prime minister, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh.
anyway, and Carney's got the resume. Like, Carney, he's not the politician. He ran the Central Bank of Canada. He ran the Central Bank of the UK, of Britain. He's been in business. Like, he understands economies and how things work.
Yeah, that's why he's the man
Okay.
of the moment.
So he came in, and then the next biggest thing that the Conservatives had was their slogan for years was, apart from attacking Trudeau, it was axe the tax, the carbon tax, axe the tax, axe the tax. Even though most Canadians got money back from the tax,
Mm.
right? So what does Carney? So what does Carney do? He just day one or two after Trudeau stepped down, there was a leadership race. He became the next leader of the Liberals, and then day one, what does he do? He axes the tax, right? He
Yeah.
just got rid of it. It was too polarizing. Like there's other ways of reducing carbon, right? So, but I mean, he started taking away all the ammunition. Also, the conservatives were against like capital gains exemptions or capital gains taxes on people, and he said, okay, we'll just get rid of that as well. And yes, he's written a book called
Mm-hmm.
Value in brackets with an S, so value values. And it's a fairly recent book, I think from maybe 3 years old or something, and it's a bestseller in Canada now. And it talks about how central banks work, how the finance world works,
Yeah.
and how best to try to put a price on carbon that doesn't that's kind of just like we can't just continue to expand fossil fuels. I mean, it's
Of course
it's
not.
not going to be economically viable. I mean, you can look at the work on clean energy that China is doing, um, and other places, but I mean, China is basically ruling the world with renewables and clean energy. And China trains more scientists and engineers and doctors and STEM people and AI people and than the rest of the world combined in many cases. So I think the U.S. has to kind of wake up and say, well, how do we move forward? I mean,
How do we move
like
forward? They want to
I
move
guess,
backwards here. They want to
well,
move
let
to
me
the 1800s.
I guess let me ask you this question. I mean,
Yes.
if the U.S. didn't dominate the world with their nuclear weapons and their military,
Mm-hmm.
right? What does the U.S. have? Like, what is I mean,
Us. The
the
U.S.
world can
has
move.
amazing people,
No, I know,
but
but in terms of
not.
global influence, I'm talking. Of course,
Well,
there's
we don't
amazing people.
manufacture anything anymore.
I know. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to really ask the
Beer,
question, like, what?
beer, Buffalo Bills,
Yeah, it's like those
the
weapons in the
Sabres.
military are the curtain, and then behind the curtain is
Yeah, there you
Oz,
go.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So
Perfect.
it's like global. I mean, what do I like? I'm probably stepping way out of my knowledge area, but I don't know. I mean, we're
So
just
what?
I can have opinions like anybody else. It
That's
doesn't mean that
right.
they're
And
right.
it says that in your on your website, analysis and opinions. So it's
Yes.
okay. It's okay. There was a comment that Linda made. She's from Canada, and she said he got rid. Let me see. He got rid of the tax, but not on corporations. I think it was.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. It was people on
And
the tax was on people. It was on individuals, right? And then, but he didn't say what he was going to do with corporations. But he didn't. There was a tax on both, and he kind
mm-hmm,
of just left that out of there. So he's learning
yeah.
to become a bit of a politician.
And he's an academic and a banker, right, Kim? Because I've listened
Yeah.
to many of his interviews, and it was a breath of fresh air to hear someone with a brain, with an intellect, who could speak well. And then you listen to the orange turd we have here in the United States, and it's night and day. And I'm very happy for you guys. I mean, it was difficult in a way. I did like the NDP party, and I like the Green Party, but they now even lost more. Jangeet Singh lost
Yes, they
his
did.
seat.
It became very sort of you either vote for one or the other, and it
Yeah, like
became
we
a
are.
very sort of what's the reaction? How is Canada going to stay a sovereign country? How do we what do we do? What's the most effective thing? And I think the first thing Carney did when he was prime minister is he went to Europe and he talked to European leaders. And I know what he talked about. He talked about ways to reduce the U.S. dollar. Like so,
Mm-hmm.
up until that visit, they were buying U.S. treasuries. Europe, many
Yeah,
countries in
sure.
Europe,
Everybody was
and
right.
they did this in anticipate. I mean, Trump said the tariffs are coming. It wasn't a surprise. So they were loading up on treasuries in U.S. And then they started selling them quickly after the day of reckoning or whatever, when the tariffs were all introduced, and that dropped bond prices in the U.S. and it dropped the U.S. dollar, and that gets attention to anybody that understands anything about finance in the country,
Mm,
bankers and stuff. That because the debt has to be paid off in U.S. dollars. Like the U.S. currency
still,
rules the world,
still.
right? So if the value
It's iffy.
drops, everything changes. So that started happening, and he very quickly said, "Okay, we're pausing these tariffs." And anyway, it looks good. He says Carney's a fine gentleman, right? Was the latest,
Yeah. Well,
you know.
because he's met someone who's way more intelligent than he is, if you could
You know,
call the archer intelligent,
well,
but
I think
yeah.
he respects he
He
respects
respects him. He's a
anybody that
banker.
understands money, that
Yep.
banking and stuff. So
Yep.
that this is I mean, there's a lot of reasons why Carney is kind of the perfect leader for Canada right
That
now.
is what I said. He's the man of
Yeah,
the moment, but I have a lot. Even though I am a U.S. citizen, I am very much elbows up and in support of Canada. Everybody knows I fly a Canadian flag here now. I am uh, very happy to see the change up there,
yeah.
and
I mean, we'd love to see things get back to
of course,
get back to normal, get back to an even keel. I mean, some I worked
uh,
in California myself for a couple of years. I worked for Rockwell International, on laser research, just after my master's.
yeah.
And I go to lots of conferences. I have lots of friends. I almost stayed in the U.S. I just came back because personal reasons.
Well, I don't know if I would have stayed in the U.S. if I had a chance to go back,
But
but
climate is a huge factor in driving inflation, and that needs to be recognized by people. This is a big concern. I mean, when there's a massive fire that takes out a town, think of all the lumber and the materials, and people. Not only are people's lives disrupted and they're made homeless, they have to go
hmm.
live elsewhere. Things like, what about it was a double whammy in Pasadena, those LA fires that took out
Oh,
the
tragic.
Altamira or whatever, just near
Yeah.
JPL. I mean,
Altadena. We Black Bear
out,
News. Kevin lost his house.
yeah, yeah. So, and there were like at least 40, 50 climate scientists that worked at JPL and stuff on
Yeah.
probes and NASA stuff. So that not only so they lost their they've been trying to warn people about climate change dangers, and the fire takes out their neighborhood and their houses, and then they get their jobs at NOAA or NASA JPL cut, right? So all of these tragedies occurring in a very short period of time. They certainly need to read this happiness report.
Okay.
I didn't what I didn't mention about the report, and I haven't read it yet, by
You
the way.
cover it first, and then I'll
I
cover it
will.
after.
Well, I'm hoping one of the listeners does a great video on it, and I'll just put a link to it. When I do a video on it, I'll say, here's the report. You should read it and go to this link because this explains it perfectly, right? So I'm hoping
Right.
somebody. Well, but anyway,
All
I'll read the.
right.
But anyway, the U.S. has dropped significantly on that index. Like the U.S. happiness has plummeted,
I
and
think
you
it's
can
been plummeting for a
try to
long time. It's
try to
never
figure
been.
out why. And we can
Yeah.
reverse these things. I mean, community is so important, like the local community. Next time you go to the bank, start a conversation with person working there, your grocery store, start talking to them. Like community is so important, right? It's just it's so important to an individual's
Hmm.
balance and well-being, and we got to
Oh,
kind
we
of attempt
talk.
to
We talk
stay
about
somewhat
that.
sane given all
Yeah.
of the stresses and so on, right?
Do
So,
you have right off the cuff? Do you have collab or post plans, or do you have a plan in place for your family if something happened in Ottawa or in your area that was catastrophic? Do you have that kind of preparation?
um, not, I mean, there's different, not really, no. Not saying, I mean, I think Canada's pretty good because we can always go further north, right? If things like it's
Right.
warming further north, the soils are
Yeah.
getting better. We've got a very low population density and a lot of space, right? I mean, some people talk about New Zealand and,
No.
Australia or,
The bunkers. The
yeah,
bunkers.
it's so I think I've thought about it. I've done videos on it, but
Hmm.
another thing that if all else fails, then you can always try not to be as close to your family and friends, right? Because if you're worried about bunkers for your kids, if you don't like your kids, you don't need to worry about a bunker for them, right?
I
So
only
so
have
maybe
one.
step back a little bit from those attachments, right? And
Oh, I
I'm
think
I'm
I've done
saying
that.
this.
I think I've done that anyway.
I don't know. I mean, I'm saying this kind of like just no.
Yeah.
I'm sort of rambling. Like
Tongue in
I'm not,
cheek. Well, then why don't
tongue
we
in cheek,
perfect time to move over to the chat then and get some of the questions that they have for you because that's a big thing. And we are at the what? Oh, hour and 20-minute mark. Wow. This just could have gone all night. All right. Let us look for some questions. Okay. John, does the prospect of the next pandemic seem almost guaranteed given the idiocy of the Trump regime and how climate change ties into that? Mm.
yeah. See, I mean, it's a great question because the some people I have some friends and that they say the pandemic hasn't ended, right? Like a friend
Well,
just sent
people still
me
get
some.
it.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, long COVID is a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this friend was arguing that maybe 1 in 7 Canadians had long COVID or something. I have no idea. Like this guy is maybe a bit over the top with what he says, but he argues that the last pandemic is still a thing, and it's just that we're choosing to ignore it.
Ignore it.
I don't know. I mean, measles is becoming a big deal down in the U.S. and it's moved up. It's also in Canada, and this
Oh,
is why is
I'm
measles? Why
sorry.
is measles? It's because of parents not vaccinating their kids. And if you look at, I mean, measles is a clear case where the vaccines basically eradicated the
Yes.
disease and made life much better for people, and yet
Polio too. Polio
yeah, so
too.
it comes down to sort of trusting authorities and trusting people. Like if you don't think authorities in charge are competent of doing anything, then yeah, you stay away from anything they produce or anything they say, right? So, but
Sad.
this gets back to we have to really figure out how to how to understand what reality is, right? And talk about the reality of the situation, educate ourselves and other people, and not be caught up in stuff that isn't just simply is not true.
Right.
So I don't know. So there is concern, but at least having gone through COVID, we kind of we've lost a bit of fear for, say, a future pandemic. I think because we know that we can, there's things that we can do, individuals can do. One of the things that surprised me about COVID more than anything else was that the amount of time it took for people to realize that this is like an airborne disease.
Mm.
And
Mm.
if you're coughing it out and there's somebody in the room, you're probably going to be spreading it
Yeah, of
around.
course.
And this didn't really this wasn't understood by many people,
Well,
including
the
initially. Or
virologists did. The
yeah,
virologists
the
did, and I
virologist,
started following them early to learn because I
right.
wanted to. I wanted to know what was going on, and I took the Intro to Virology 101 from Columbia, non-matriculated with Vincent Racaniello on through his channel because it was so fascinating. I never knew I had an aptitude to learn about it, but you can learn about anything if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, I guess we have to figure out, like, we operate on in certain patterns. Humans, I'm talking about, like our tribalism, in groups of people. We get in groups of people, and then there's group think, and it can become totally disconnected to reality, and then it's like a cult in a way, right? So how do
It
we? I
is a
mean,
cult here.
well, I don't know. So we have
I
to.
do.
We need to get more psychologists and psychiatrists and neuroscientists and stuff to
Oh,
come up with some
but there are
plans and ways
psychologists.
to mitigate some of these things
There's
so that we.
did you ever hear of inoculation theory? I'm very much into this too. Inoculation theory is where
Well, you get exposed to very low concentration of something,
no,
then
you
your
teach
antibodies
children.
build up.
You teach children how to you teach people, children in schools how to inoculate themselves from misinformation and disinformation. So when they are
Right.
growing up, they are inoculated, they are learned. It's a psychological theory. I'm very interested in that. I've done shows on that. But in the United States, that'll never fly in the school systems now, where they want to separate church and state. Things are changing very fast here.
Yeah.
But that is something I'm interested in, is inoculation theory. It could be used in other countries for schools to help children. It's fascinating. It really is. It's not, they replicate it sounds like, okay, it's an inoculation, but it's a psychological inoculation. Very fascinating.
Right.
So you might want
Yeah.
to do something on that. I'll send you some links. You'd be the perfect
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, yeah, sure. That's it. I mean, it's
Okay.
my mother would always say, "Don't believe everything you read. Don't believe everything you see." Now is very important, right? With like the deep fakes videos
Oh,
that look so
I fell
realistic,
for one. I did fall for
where
one.
this is an issue.
Yeah.
Just before the Canadian election on Twitter, there was all kinds of videos going on showing Carney having drinks with that the guy who what was that guy with the big scandal, the child molester,
Oh,
that guy,
Jeffrey Epstein. No.
Jeffrey
Yeah,
Epstein.
Jeffrey
Yeah,
Epstein.
yeah. So it showed big pictures of Carney having beers with
With
Jeffrey
Jeffrey Epstein.
Epstein.
But
It's all
everybody
deep,
knows that's
and
bullshit. Yeah.
it's all deep fake and stuff. But I mean, how
that's
many
that's part of
people?
inoculation theory. It's part of training.
Yeah,
But this is actually now new territory, because when they
yeah,
originally were working on this theory, there weren't the AI deep fakes. So now it's bringing in so much more. It is a dangerous world for kids. It is,
yeah.
because they're growing up. I grew up without any of that. It's all recent, but children are just inundated with all of it now, and you really have to be careful with the internet, I think, with kids.
Yeah, there's some Australian schools that phones have been banned at school for a long time, but
Yeah.
kids could still look at them in breaks and stuff. But now they're completely banning phones
I have a
from
thought
school
about that,
property.
but let
Um,
me tell you my
and
thought about it.
if you need to go to get information from the
Mm,
web, you go to the library or something, but you don't have your phone. You can't be texting
okay.
people all day. So
What?
they're trying different things.
Yeah, but what about this? They keep the kids without the phones at school, but don't you think there should be a way to also teach kids to use phones responsibly, to understand the power of the phone, to
Yeah,
understand what they
yeah,
have in their
yeah.
hands? So if they ban
Right.
them, they're
Specific.
not teaching that either.
Yeah. So specific classes. So yes, exactly. So you
Yeah,
could
but
have
I
a
mean, I
day where you could have a day where the whole or say have a week where everybody brings their phone that week and they
yeah,
learn about the inoculation stuff and you get
yeah,
like
I love it.
yeah,
All
it's
that.
not just segmented, and like schools can start teaching things a bit more differently for some social issues. Like get the entire school learning about the same subject for a few days, and talking to
Uh,
people about it, and trading ideas. I don't know. I mean, it's
It's very interesting though, and I like
yeah.
this back and forth with you on this stuff. Okay, let's see. We have more questions. Uh Tommyist, is collapse of AMOC a negative climate feedback loop?
Okay. Is it a negative feedback loop? Okay, I mean, of course, we talk about feedbacks like something, negative is something normally bad, positive something good, but when you
Mm-hmm.
have a positive feedback, it's an accelerating feedback to speed things up, and when you have a negative feedback, it slows things down, it breaks, it slows down the rate of change. So generally, you want negative feedbacks to have a stable system. Now, the AMOC will it's overall it will definitely change the planet never heats up uniformly, right? Certain regions heat up much faster than other regions. Up to,
Sure.
it's normally the polar regions warming 4 or 5 7 times faster than the equator. When an AMOC shutdown would mean that you go into a deep freeze in the Arctic, in Western Europe, Eastern Canada, Greenland stops melting, right? It starts to the ice, the sea ice comes back up there. Everything reverses, right? There's no way we have a blue ocean event in the Arctic, right? And this state could be reached for decades and decades and decades. But what
Okay.
happens? The problem is that heat has to go somewhere. So if the heat's not going from the equator up into the Arctic, then the equator, the tropics warm up very, very rapidly, and the heat goes into the southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
And studies have been done, and they show that the water would warm so much in the southern hemisphere that it would get underneath the West Antarctic ice
Mm-hmm.
sheet and destabilize it, and it would start undercutting major ice shelves all around Antarctica. So sea level rise would greatly accelerate because the additional melting from Antarctica would far exceed the melting that's occurring in Greenland right now. So sea levels would be expected to rise probably 3-4 meters within say 4 or 5 decades.
Wow.
And then we have global coastline problems and stuff. It's also very difficult to grow food in Europe, right? So you have to answer that question by looking at where you are in the world. So, if you're in the Scandinavian countries and Norway, it's suddenly like, can you really live that well in that country? 10 degrees Celsius cooler than it is now. And, you can't, I mean, what can you do there? Like but Europe, you lose the breadbasket for European crops in
That's
many
right.
countries,
It's
right? So then
terrifying.
and Eastern Canada would get a lot colder, but I think Western Canada we could grow even more food there.
Mm.
So, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, there's certain regions that get so warm, like in South America and so on. But most people live in northern hemisphere countries, so it would disrupt the whole system. I mean, the Earth is still going to be warming
Mm-hmm.
overall, but the
Yeah,
distribution
regardless of what we do, right? It's still going to
will be
warm.
completely out of whack. So anyway, this is why I think it hasn't come up really, but we need to figure out ways to capture carbon from the atmosphere ocean system and sequester it long term, whether it be
Algae,
ocean
natural
sediment.
things, not big
Yeah,
carbon capture things on smokestacks, business as usual. Nope.
yeah, and we need to seriously. I mean, if I had the money and backing, I could cool the planet to half a degree in 6 months
Half a degree in
with
6 months.
the technique of solar sulfur aerosol injection into the
That's a
stratosphere.
scary. That's a whole other show. That's scary
Yeah,
to a
yeah. So I
lot of
mean, in
people. We'll have to.
technology,
Yeah,
yeah, we can do that. Musk could
I'd
do
like
that.
to. Well,
If
that's
If Trump gets worried about climate change, guess what he's going to do?
that's Ministry of the Future stuff. That's what
Yeah, yeah.
Kim
Ministry of
Stanley
the Future.
Robinson talked about. They were
Yeah,
doing it in
it's,
India.
it's a
She's
definite thing to read. And
yeah, I know.
in Baku, I hung out quite a bit with people with the Cambridge Climate Repair Center, and they have a
Oh.
lot of interesting ideas. And they've got some money recently to start doing some just basic trials, just some basic science on this sort of thing. How would they do it? What
Hmm.
would how would you deploy it? What would the temperatures be? But see, we have a wherever there's some real science, there's always usually some sort of conspiracy
Oh,
thing
it's the
preceding,
chemtrails. Oh, it's the deep
right? So
state.
that's
Oh,
the
they're
thing
gonna
that
do it. Yeah.
so there's a big group, there's a selected group of people, devout zealots. Don't become a zealot in anything. Acknowledge that you could
Just
be
learn.
wrong. I mean, the
Yeah,
problem
that's
is
it.
right? I
That's
mean, I
it.
could everything I'm saying now could turn out to be wrong, right? I mean, I'm just doing the best that I can right now. But you have to be honest with people. But I mean, the zealot, like there are people that think we're absolutely putting metals up into the sky and we're changing the weather right now. And how are these people going to react when we have a British research group wanting to
Yeah, doing a
actually
small thing.
sulfur into the atmosphere to measure what it's going to
Well,
do?
it's not the deep state. I mean, if it's not the
Right?
deep
So
state,
there's always a conspiracy
jeez.
theory. I mean, how come nobody in the U.S. talks about the possibility that Musk got some of his programmers to just fix the machines so that Trump would win in every swing
They
state.
are
How come
talking
they
about it.
never mentioned? Well, it's very little.
Well,
It's
not on the
taking a long
media
time to
because
talk about it.
nobody wants to be Mike Littell of the left.
Well,
Nobody
for
wants
four
to be the pillow
years,
guy.
for 4 years, Trump and party were saying that the Democrats had stolen the election and that he won legitimately,
Of
right?
course.
So of course it prepares the ground. If you always accuse the other side of doing stuff, and
That
then that
you're
you're going to
doing.
do yourself,
Sure.
right,
Well,
later,
that's
right?
famous Republican Party mantra. Okay,
Has
let's.
anybody had a cut in their ear before? Have you ever cut your ear? Like you're shaving and you cut your ear, it bleeds profusely.
uh,
And it does that for a long period of time.
yeah.
So, if you get a bullet and there's a piece of your ear
Oh,
missing,
that's such bullshit.
it can't heal
That was
instantly. So
staged.
days later, like so. Anyway, these sort of questions are, maybe we're all conspiracy
Yeah,
theorists.
but
It
I
just
don't
some of
believe it.
them are
I
right
don't
and some
believe
of
it.
them are.
Maybe I
I
am
don't
too. I
know.
don't believe it.
I
Okay,
mean, what
let's
is a
see.
conspiracy theory? Look at the definition, right? It's like three people talking, planning something, right?
And then a lot of people say, but all the conspiracies, well, look at how they've come true. You have to be much more nuanced than that. But
Yeah, yeah, you need to. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. But I think one of the biggest things is people need to really learn to say, you know what, I screwed up. I'm wrong. I had this idea
I
and I
sure
was just
have.
wrong. Like if people
I
could say
have.
that,
Yeah.
practice saying that in the next few weeks yourself. It makes,
Okay.
first of all, it makes you feel a lot better, right? You think it makes
Wrong.
you think people respect you more, actually.
Yeah.
If
If
you're
you can admit
working
you're
hard
wrong
all
about something,
the time,
heck
people
yeah.
stop listening to you, and yeah, they just think that you're just a blowhard. You have to be right all the time. Never admit a mistake. Never admit you're wrong, Mister Tough Guy. But you'll be respected. Your
Oh, but
ideas
he's
will
a
be
tough
listened to
guy.
more if you
Well, that's
admit that you're
what
wrong.
Prime Minister Carney said it right in his speech. If he's wrong, he'll admit it. He'll learn from it
Yeah.
and move on. Okay, questions. Poppy. Paul, our scientists have been fired here in the land of the free. Please encourage Canada to hire them. All right, we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, yes, I think, I mean, Canadian universities there's definitely a strong interest, lots of
Okay.
strong interest in scientists coming here and also into European research places and, other places. I think even China is starting to set up some research institutes that are English speaking
Oh, okay.
institutes, right? I mean, there's a huge culture shock if you were to move there, but if you
Yeah,
know,
it
I mean,
is.
we can do anything for a couple of years, right? Most of us, right? If we're younger, we can, it's like an adventure. Just treat it as an
I
adventure.
have
Sometimes
family.
they're forced on us. Sometimes, like you lose your house and you got to move somewhere. You could be devastated, or you can. It's all how your attitude, and it's easy to be theoretical and say, yeah, my house burns down. Well, I got to move somewhere else. It's not. I don't got rid of all the clutter. You know,
I don't want to do it that way,
I'm
but
free once again.
I am
Back to my
free.
university days or something. I don't know.
Ah. Okay, we've
But
got
attitude.
George. George, does Paul have a view on Tony Blair this week declaring that net zero is dead? For your information, the TB Institute is funded by Saudi Arabia related. What do you think? Do you hear that?
Net zero is dead.
Tony Blair said it.
There's many people that would argue that it was never alive in the first place,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I would have to
That's the
argue
doomer
that
view.
okay, you know what? Let's just figure out how to scale up carbon removal from the atmosphere, methane removal, CO2. Let's try to
Okay.
stimulate the oceans, the phytoplankton, to regenerate the sinks of carbon. And to buy us time to do all that, maybe we have to tinker with cooling the planet with some of these large schemes.
Ooh, it,
Which,
it makes me nervous, but I do trust your judgment on at least looking into all of this, and I will be following suit and researching it. Here's a question. Is democracy failing to deliver on climate commitments? Hello, Madakar. Welcome.
yes, I mean, democracy is. It's on the endangered species list, it seems, right now around the world, many places. So, Canada, maybe we triggered, maybe, we can't give up. I mean, we got to keep trying, and democracies like China doesn't have democracy. People would argue, and yet they're probably doing more for
The
renewable
environment
energy, clean energy, the environment now.
than we
People
are.
used to say a few years ago, China, the line was, oh, they're building a new coal plant every week, right?
Hmm.
And if they're building, maybe they're building a new coal plant every 2 weeks now or every month. I don't know, but they're building clean energy and electric cars and all kinds of high tech stuff. They recognize climate change, so it's not a linear pathway, right? And also, when
Hmm.
something's happening, we tend to get so caught up in it,
Yeah.
right? Try
Caught
to
up.
try to try to think of try to think of that's why knowing a bit of history is very important, I think, for everybody. I used to hate history. So
Oh.
the subject I hated the most. I
Oh.
like geography, the sciences, but now I read quite a bit of history because
It's
history can
important.
you need to be you need that time balance. Like something terrible happens now and you just think it's the end of the world, and you look at the history.
Hmm.
We've had many times and many periods, and that
Yeah.
way you can also think more, probably get a better idea for what's happening in the future if you understand a bit more
History.
about the
That's
history.
why we have Antonio Reed on this channel. He is a historian, and
Yeah,
now actually he's gone all the way back, and he is studying the before BC, the before Christ. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
he's
like
doing
the
some
rise of civilizations and
great,
stuff.
yeah, incredible studies. All right,
Yeah, I mean,
Wanda. Oh,
call
go ahead.
call it temporal stability, right? In order
Oh,
to have
nice.
temporal stability, you need to understand what's something about history,
Yes,
and in order to
I
make any
believe it.
prediction as to what might happen in the future, you need to have some idea of what happened in the
What
past, and
happened?
also, it gives you more sort of perspective. Like you can, and that's very important for being mentally, stable, and looking after your health. And
I
I mean, you
believe
gotta
that.
you gotta go get a puppy, go on walks, do something to keep a decent
Okay. How
state.
about this question? How do pets help with collapse anxiety? And how can we also help our pets who have anxiety from? There's two questions there. How do pets
Yeah,
help us? And how can we help them when there's storms and things like that? Somebody told me I need to have a prescription for, and this is a Canadian who does a prepper channel, Hoople's cat, but he's was a retired RN from Big Toronto Hospital, knows a lot, and he says our pets should have anti-anxiety meds for these horrible potential events so that they don't have to experience it. But how do they help us? How does your dog help you?
well, I've already, my bad sense of humor already pointed out that
Yeah,
it's like a backup food supply. If,
that's it. That's right in the beginning.
but I don't
She
think
might
that's
not
what
have been here.
your, a little scrawny cat's not going to do. So you might want to get this really big
I'm
dog or something.
sorry. I already had
Um,
big dogs.
but
I had big dogs.
yeah, no, I mean, it's just, I mean, look, you go out for a while. I mean, I'm a bit biased because I think, when I got a dog, I had dogs as a kid growing up, but not as an adult. And we got this dog,
Oh,
and like the dog, I hated the dog going in you're supposed to do cage training.
yeah, I
So
hate
when
that
you
too.
take your dog to a kennel, the dog can stay in a kennel. So,
I hate that too.
we had this cage. One night he was in there, not even the whole night. I just ended up sleeping on the sofa for a month, and the dog slept on top of me. Right, and then he settled down. He was calm
Yeah.
and stuff. The problem is he totally imprinted on me. So he's got to be, sometimes other people, family members, he'll just run by them. Where's dad? Where's Paul? Where's dad? Right. So this is a bit difficult for some other family members, the level of imprintation. But I don't know. I
Wow.
mean, there's this thing. I mean, the dog sees you, relies on you, trusts you. You care for it, and
Yeah.
it exhibits happiness,
I
right? Its
love
tail's
my
wagging like
dogs.
crazy. It
Mm-hmm.
jumps up on you. Uses you as a salt lick. I mean, I have Newton in a lot of my. Like I had no idea I'd get so attached to this animal,
And look what
right?
happened. And yeah, you thought it was Shackleton, and
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, I.
So I think it's working. I think I'm I think I'm able to fully function, for the most part. Everybody has bad days,
You're
right?
doing
Where you
well. You're doing well.
so,
Yeah,
so
you're
I don't know.
doing
I think
well.
cats. I think cats. Yeah, they. I mean, also, they just take you for who you are, right? I mean, we have to form human bonds and
Oh, my cats are very
friends and
bonded. Yes.
community. I mean, I love hanging out at the local coffee shop. I got to know loads of people that are in there and their
Terrific.
lives, what they're doing. So, you have to have, I think community is your local community is very, very important. And cats taking dogs. It's funny because Newton had an incredible day this morning because we took him for a walk. I took him for a walk, and then I took him to one of the local pet places to give him you can do it yourself car wash for pets essentially.
Yeah.
So we go in there, and it wasn't that expensive. They have really high tables, and your dog's in this big tub, and they've got the shower and the water and as many towels as you need, and treats there, and even a shampoo.
Aw, you're really enjoying this.
So it was great, and he just loves it, and they have gerbils in cages in the pet store. So they're at ground level. He's sniffing them, and they're sniffing back. No fear exhibited because they're in behind
Oh, I
some
don't
bars.
like that. Selling gerbils. Oh,
No, I know. And
no,
then
I
there was
hate
a
it
couple of
all.
rabbits and stuff. But I mean, he
Yeah.
was bonding with all these. And then finally, as I'm pulling him away from the rabbit, right? Like they're sniffing each other. They're rubbing noses. He's a big guy, and this little tiny rabbit has no fear of him. And I pull him away and said, "We got to go." And he starts whimpering. So I let him go back to the rabbit for another couple minutes. So anyway, uh,
Paul,
so
you
I,
gotta
I
start.
so
Big Newton
hours.
dog and trees.
Yeah, yeah. So the bonding is very strong. I
That's
mean,
wonderful. It's wonderful. And we're going to end on a good note. That's, how can you not end on this good note? I mean, there are other questions. I mean, I can go into, well, let's see. Trish is asking odds of a BOE 2025.
yeah. So this is I the odds are getting greater and greater. But if the AMOC shuts down, then the BOE is going to be in Antarctica, not in the
Right.
Arctic.
Which maybe
Right. So then
Trish,
this is a huge wild card. This AMOC
it
situation.
is.
Otherwise, I could see I would like it's hard to say in 1 year what it might be, but we're pushing along record low levels of sea ice in both poles. So it's almost like a
Definitely.
race which one will give first. And then you need to go and look in the paleo records and see what happened to the poles in back in the climate records. And what you can see is that often there's oscillations. So if
Yeah.
one pole got very, very cold, the other pole would get very, very warm, and then it would swing back to the opposite situation, as the whole climate was gyrating. And we'll get a lot more detailed resolution. There's some very interesting research going on right now on Axel Heiberg Island in the Canadian Arctic. There's a
Oh,
glacier called the Mueller Great, I believe it's called the Mueller Glacier, and
okay.
it's about 600 meters thick, sitting on top of bedrock. And the scientists are up there, a team of 10 from a bunch of different Canadian universities,
Oh,
and they're
cool.
doing an ice core right through this whole thing over the next month. And if you Google, they're doing live blogs every day on their progress and so on. But what they'll get
Fantastic.
they'll get a record going back, a very, very detailed, high resolution record going back to, at least 15,000 years ago, I believe. It depends on how many layers they get. Like, we don't know until they get to the bedrock. But, counting the layers, and they can tell, I think they're back about 250 years already. They've gone down about 60 meters, I think.
Damn.
So they have a lot, so they're giving information. They're giving some science to people in the public, as they're doing the work, which is very, very interesting, especially if young people are watching and thinking, I might want to be a scientist. look how fun it is. You get to fly planes and go up into the Arctic and, do this sort of stuff.
Yeah, right. Okay, Paul. We do the environmental coffee house flush of the day. I don't know if you remember that. And we flush down something we don't like. Can you pick something for a nice big flush?
Denialism, I guess. That's an
Okay.
obvious.
Let's flush denialism because it's a destroyer. Goodbye, denialism. Bye bye. All right. Go on. We flushed denialism. It's no longer to be had on the planet. Oh wait, lightning rod. He wanted to flush down pipelines, but only one.
Pipeline.
I don't know if one flush tonight. Man, we could do two flushes, but this was a great show. I
Yeah.
enjoyed this so much. I do want to thank Kim for the super chat. Thank you so much. That is very lovely in support of the channel. I always grateful, always appreciative for everybody here. Paul, why don't you give us the ending, tie it all together, what we've talked about.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we've covered quite a bit. I think one of the things I guess is it's important to sort of you got to monitor your own body and your signs and so on. If you see, you have to take care of yourself, right? I mean, the world could be falling apart, but as long as you could take care of yourself and have try to have some sort of you know attitude to allow you to deal with all this stuff. I find gallows humor or very bad humor to be one thing. We've mentioned pets and so on. There's lots of different things that we can do, and we have sort of agency within us to deal with this stuff. We just have to, and sometimes it's just too much and overwhelming. So don't, just
Right.
shut your phone on for a couple of days
Right.
and do what
Exactly.
rejuvenate some hobbies that you've given up
Growing
on.
food. It's gardening season here, and there's homesteaders in our audience with chickens, and everybody's talking about that. And now that the weather's changing for me too, it's my garden and my place, and putting new fences around my fruit trees because they're getting big. And there's a lot of good stuff to do. We don't have to always be addicted to the negative and the fear porn and rage porn and all of this stuff. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. All right.
Well, thank you, everybody,
Thank
for.
you. This was fantastic. Paul, we'll have you back again. I really enjoyed this, of course. As always. I
Okay,
always
okay,
enjoy with
sounds
you.
good. Okay,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Peace out. We need peace. That's a big thing. Yeah.